Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Out of the Park 23 as the Minnesota Twins. And unsurprisingly, we do end up winning the division. We clinched the division on September 7th, so super early. Luckily, managed to avoid any more serious injuries in the last month of the year where there wasn't a ton to really worry about at that point. We do manage to win 100 games. I think we might be the first team in this sim to win 100. I don't remember if the Dodgers did early on, but nobody else even gets to 95 this year. So we're pretty clear in a way the best team in the league. Whether that means we actually end up winning the World Series, obviously, who knows, but we will see. So we did have a decent amount of kind of league leader stuff. Carlos Correa is tied with Vlad Guerrero with 7.2 WAR. And you might look at this and say, offensively, he was not that great. I mean, he played most of the year, a little bit above average. 20 homers, 85 RBIs, 358 on base. Like, that's not outstanding. Like, obviously, it's good. But, I mean, this was really the story of highest zone rating in the league. I believe highest defensive efficiency for shortstops. So, I mean, this is why I'm paying him $38 million a year. Is because even in years where he's down offensively, the defense is so good that it doesn't really matter. Like, so far in the 3 years that I've had him in this save, we've got 18 WAR over 3 years, which you would take just in general, and keep in mind that one of those is 48 games last year. So he's been incredible. Jose Miranda has a really good year. You can see some of the red here showing that he led the American League in those categories. 311 batting average, 188 hits, 50 doubles. Very good player. Not even arbitration eligible next year, so we have him for 4 more years. And realistically, one of the things I think is interesting is the fact that he performed pretty well at third base. So the 2.1 zone rating, above average defensive efficiency, means that even though he has this gold glove from last year at first base, which don't really understand still because he wasn't very good there this year, I think he's our third baseman of the future at this point. I don't have any other options that I'm loving right now. I mean, there's potentials around. I mean, there's Aranda's okay at third. Kavoko, if he could figure out the bat, is probably a better defensive third baseman. Even though he was pretty awful there this year. But that's kind of surprising to me. Like, honestly, I kind of am discounting most of the year for Kavoko. We'll see kind of how that shapes up. But the other thing that I think is one of the more interesting things. Okay, this doesn't actually show in red, which is unfortunate. Blake actually led the league in framing runs, and his catcher ERA was tops in the American League. So really what we're getting from him, like, this is what I was sort of talking about last year, when I was like, this 72 isn't really what I want. If it can get to 80 to 90, which it is now, 3.6 WAR for a below average hitter. And really this is something I'm totally okay with for my catcher. Where he's, again, not salary arbitration eligible. I think he's a really good bat. Not bat, but a really good catcher to have on the team. Where even if he isn't even a league average hitter ever again after that 2022 year, I still think he'll be a pretty consistent 2.5 to 4 WAR player, which I am totally fine with at my catcher position with the amount of money I'm paying in some other places. Potts also has a very good year, 3.6 WAR. I think he's probably more the first baseman of the two, which is a little weird to me. And it says that I think my scout might not be as good defensively because he just should be a better defender than Miranda. Because Miranda is lower range, lower arm, and is it same turn double play, which shouldn't matter at third base. And yet he was notably better. So maybe it's just a 1-year thing, but I mean, that's a very good bat to have around. Kepler, gosh, This is a hard decision. I mean, in some ways it's not, because this is not a contract I want to pay anything remotely like this. I don't want to be paying him $25 million a year, even though he's been good. He's but 32 going into next year. That means it's probably on the decline. And realistically, I don't know. Like you need this to go up. He's good defensively, but it's right field. It doesn't matter as much to have a good defender there. So that might, and what I'm sort of thinking right now is my outfield next year will probably be Frelick in left, Kirilloff in right, with Buxton ideally in center, but with Royce being the backup there still while starting at second. I mean, Polanco, it's hard to turn down $12 million for this type of production. So I think he probably will be back to be the backup second baseman. And really, I think I'm going to try to use spring training to get him better at third as well, so that I can play him there some more. But yeah, and then obviously Kirilloff didn't play a ton this year. I mean, Aranda was kind of a utility guy who got a pretty good amount of at bats and was good, but I think that realistically this is a down year for him, but it's explainable by injuries. I don't love how far down my scout has came on him over the course of the last year. Where you can see, I mean, while the 75 was probably never accurate, I feel like the 65 might have been. To see contact going down concerns me. For the amount of time and length I'm paying him, I need him to be a little bit better than this. But we'll see. So that's sort of where we are hitter-wise. Nothing else super important to talk about here. Pitching-wise, couple of league leaders here as well. Aaron Nola leads all of baseball, I believe. I think he was tied with some people at the 16 wins. See again that red ink there. DeGrom led the American League in strikeout to walk ratio, so a little over 5 there. I mean, 10.1 strikeouts per 9 as a starting pitcher is pretty good. And obviously the super low walks as well really helps. And yeah, Ryan Presley leads the league in saves with 48. Not super surprising. That's a pretty big number. Sub 1 ERA. This is looking like this is going to be a really good pickup for me for the bullpen of bringing him back home to Minnesota, where he started his career. Forget when all was he here. So as far as this save goes, he'll have played, looks like, 6 years in Houston. And yeah, so he will definitely be getting some run there. As far as extending him, I think 4 years is tough for a 35-year-old. I might look at this a little bit to see if maybe he'll do like a two maybe 3-year deal to be kind of this back of the bullpen stud, but I'm definitely not super tied to that. Anderson's probably gone at the end of the year. I've got plenty of pitchers just like that. Alcala, I'm not super sold on what I'm going to want to do with him either. The FIP is way back up, which is concerning. That has me concerned. The BABIP is quite a bit lower than the last couple of years. And with some of the pieces that I have around him, it's either going to be do what I did with Cotton, which is probably do the arbitration, re-sign him, then look to trade him. Or we might just non-tender him and move on with some of the other pieces that we have. Because I like a lot of the potential bullpen arms that I have right now. A lot of these guys I want to keep back. Moran had 14 shutout innings after calling him up. I don't really believe this 40. I think he's probably better than that with especially these two. The walks, I expect him to walk a lot more than 2 guys per 9 that he did this year, but I mean the stuff and the movement are both really good, so ground ball pitchers are nice with the type of defense that I have behind him. Gomez is a concerning point for me where he was just pretty bad this year. After the really good year he had last year, this next year will be pretty defining in terms of what his role is for me long term. But I would like him to be back in the rotation. Because DeGrom is obviously back, Nola's back, Alcantara's back. Marquez is a decision point for me for sure. 12, yeah, so $11.6 million deal, $3 million buyout. What I want to do with him is pretty up in the air. I have some decent options at AAA that I'd like to give some run. So I think I'm leaning towards not bringing him back. But it's definitely something that I will consider bringing him back. It was a pretty good signing, I think, all things considered. But whether or not we want to have him back, so that'd be his age 30 season next year. So we'll see. And obviously quite a bit better. When you have better defense behind ground ball pitchers, that helps quite a bit. That's the team. And then I want to talk more about some of the prospect stuff because I'm trying to figure out where I want to go with some of these guys. So Adrian, even though he's still a top 15 prospect, is concerning me more and more. Had a bad year last year when they got promoted him to the Florida League, so I bumped him back to the Dominican League, and he was awful again this year. So that's really concerning, even though these ratings are all still super high. Trying to figure out what's going on with him is something that needs to be a pretty high priority for me. Weissman continues to deal with injuries. He's a top 60 prospect, which is nice, but I mean, I'm just really concerned about these injuries of what exactly we can do here. And he should be a decent pitcher at A-ball, but he just kind of really hasn't been. The control's been a pretty big problem. But if he can start to figure that out, I think that's the point where he could start to shoot up. But for right now, I really don't know. Love is a guy I want to give run in the majors next year for sure. He had a pretty good year at AAA. I think all things considered, the walks are at a pretty reasonable point now, I think. Struck out a lot of people. I want to give him run, and I think he's one of the biggest reasons why I'm leaning towards not bringing Marquez back is because I want to see what he can do. As well as Klassen, who I don't think is going to be a major league piece for me next year, but he got off. He had a really good start to the year. His first 3 or 4 starts were all really, really good, and then he struggled afterwards. The BABIP is super high here, which is weird as a fly ball pitcher to have such a high BABIP. I would expect that to come down. And I think that's very evident in this FIP of being above league average there, even with the ERA being as high as it was. So I definitely think there's still a lot of potential there. I'm going to skip down to Rocker real quick because the injury seems like it's hurt him quite a bit. After the really good 23, walked 2.5 more per 9. The strikeouts are down, and this is even with the BABIP coming down from last year. So that's just really, really concerning to me at this point. Is his potential actually as a starter at this point? I don't know. I think there's a decent chance he's going to end up running more as a reliever if the control can't get figured out. Where you can see the stuff down from originally, the movement's down quite a bit. It's concerning. That arm injury definitely looks like it hurt him. Mejia and Baez were two of the other pieces in the St. Louis trade where I also picked up Austin Love. Baez is quickly becoming a guy that I think I'm going to be getting some runs sooner than later. I don't really understand why it says that he's a 20 overall right now. Because, the current ratings are pretty reasonable. He would strike out a lot, but you would expect this to be a profile that did okay at the major league level. 70, 80 OPS plus range. And should be fine defensively. Was good in left field and rookie ball. Little bit more trouble at A ball, but that's fine. I think he actually might be more of I think he's actually probably better suited for right field, and I should probably get him more reps there than in left because of this arm. But he had a really good year both in rookie ball and in A ball. I don't love that he's Rule 5 eligible already. I don't see anybody taking him now, but as soon as next year, he's probably going to have to be on my 40 man by the end of 25. So, like, I think that this is a guy who should be okay, even to be in high A next year. Once again, sometimes these overall ratings are just really weird to me. I don't understand why this is a overall rating of 20 with these stats. Like, yeah, he's gonna strike out, but I mean, like, if I don't know. That's weird to me. Baez is definitely, I think, is a guy that I'm excited about. Mejia has struggled. I think I'm mostly out on him at this point, which is unfortunate. Kuvoka we talked about a little bit, but the year at AAA was still really good. He's still got time before he really has to be solidified as to whether or not he's a major league piece. I think I'm going to try to get him some outfield run. I think specifically in right field. I think he should be okay. Let's see. Do a quick little compare player here. Yeah, so it's sort of like reasonable in the outfield to have that a right-handed hitting corner outfielder. I think could potentially have some value as well if he's not going to start at either corner, which right now I don't see that happening with Potts and Miranda probably solidified in my corners for the next couple of years, barring some kind of injury. So we'll see there. Manuel Rodriguez had an okay year in AA. He'll probably start out there next year as well, I think. But I mean, this is a pretty reasonable piece. Some of the ratings are down from when he was a top 100 prospect, but I think that this is a guy who could still turn out to be a decent piece. He's still only 21 in AA. He definitely would be younger than league average there. And he was a basically league average hitter. So I think we start him there next year and potentially look to move him fairly early on if he gets off to a good start in AA. Balazovic, I have no idea what to do with. Out of options now. Has not established himself as a piece at the major league level at all. I really don't know what to do with him. I'm probably going to look to shop him offseason, see if another team sees him as a starter. Because realistically, at this point, I just don't see it. He has not shown an ability to strike out guys at the major league level outside of a little bit in these 11 innings. Just didn't do that at all this year. So I really don't know what to say about Balazovic at this point, other than I don't know what to do with him. Ajar is, I think, an okay potential piece. Definitely has came down in my scout size over the last year. Was still around a league average pitcher in AA, but he's 24 now. He might get some work as a potential piece that I would call up if I have injuries in my starting rotation in the majors, but I'm kind of down on him as a real long-term piece. Barrios finally had a good year in rookie ball, but it's not really to the point where I would want this bat in even the Florida League, so he probably stays where he is for now. We'll see. I mean, the bat really has to develop for a guy like this, where he can like sort of play third, sort of play first, but nothing I'm super excited about there. Nunez is probably going to be in the majors as soon as next year. Obviously, the 80 potential is real. 70 stuff, 70 movement, above average control. That's a really good piece. It's kind of crazy that a guy with this type of stuff throws 88 to 90, but I mean, this has been really good. The FIP says that it's kind of fake and that it's kind of BABIP fueled, which is probably true. But I mean, this 404 BABIP also can't be real to me, so we'll see. But he's probably going to make an appearance either in 25 or in 26 in the majors, I would expect. Andrade, I think this was probably the Babbitt Field Mirage. He's a fine enough defender, but probably not good enough to want him to be a Jacob Amaya type where you don't care about the bat because he's good enough with the glove. So he'll probably just end up being a guy who maybe chills at high A, double A as defensive depth for me. Collier, unfortunately, hasn't really developed. I was really hoping he would take off this year after the good end to 23, but he really progressed this year. So the glove looks like it was better because the WAR is higher. Yeah, really good defensively this year. So that's a potential plus. I mean, he is still only 19. So he has 2 more years before he'd have to go on Rule 5. So the dream isn't dead, I don't think, for Collier at this point. But the hype is definitely down from where it was on him before. Butcher's a guy who I've been rising on. Had another pretty decent year here in high A. There's a world in which I might even move him to double A. I think he's probably starts the year in high A again. And if I start moving some of the guys that I like out of double A, like the Class and the Hajars, he might kind of move up to double A to take their spots. And honestly, this has been a pretty good outcome for an 11th round pick, I think. Where he's at least been a very serviceable minor league pitcher. Povich had a pretty unfortunate year in double A after doing really well in high A to start the year. I still think this is a potential guy. The FIP says that the ERA is wrong. And this is obviously a pretty big gap in the two, but the 380 BABIP on a fly ball pitcher screams fake to me. So I'm definitely not out on him yet. He's Rule 5 eligible, but I doubt that I'm going to add him to my 40-man. I wouldn't see him as a huge loss if he does get taken, but I would struggle to justify adding him to a major league team right now after coming off of a not great year in double A. Orlando is a guy who I don't think this is actually a catcher, so I need the bat to develop. Quarter of his hits were doubles, so I mean, I guess at least there's that, but the bat really wasn't much in rookie ball this year. But that's fine, he's still only 18. So not a whole lot to say at that point. Ekstrom was a guy I was excited about in 23, but my scouts came down on him quite a bit from the point where they was saying that he was the 60 potential. Now it's just only up to 45. And yeah, I mean, the BABIP still screams high to me, but I would have a hard time at this point moving him out of rookie ball into A ball, so we'll see. We're ranked the 11th best system, and I think that feels pretty accurate to me. There's a couple of pieces here that I think are exciting, but there's no like superstar. It doesn't feel like it should be Atrian, but he's struggled. Weissman's the top pitching prospect. He struggled and dealt with 2 major injuries now. I mean, this is I think really the concern to me with him is the torn flexor tendon into shoulder inflammation. That's rough. And this is a lot of injuries. You know, it's the first 6 are all day-to-day, but this is 2 back-to-back injuries that are going to take a solid amount of time. So I mean, this was about a 2.5-month thing where they just made the call to shut him down for the year. And yeah, so I guess the other person to talk about is Coronel, who's still in the international complex. I don't think. Yeah, I mean, this, even in the Dominican League, I mean, I don't really need to put him there and start his contract clock yet. But I mean, this is a pretty good defensive player. Backup shortstop, I think, should be a good second baseman, good third baseman. If the bat turns out to be much of anything, I think this is the guy who could reach the majors. So that's nice. We'll see what actually ends up happening, but my current international prospect doesn't give me super high expectations for him. But we'll see. There's a couple pieces that we're excited about. The playoffs we're going into coming up. Don't know who we're gonna play in our first round yet. We'll have to see who wins the wild card matchups. So we can take a quick look at the playoff tree and what this is gonna look like. So we'll get the winner of Toronto versus Houston. Texas is the second best team in the American League. They get the Angels or Tampa Bay. The AL Central did kind of fall back off after we saw them get off to a pretty good start. So only the Twins represent the division there. Over in the NL, we have the Dodgers and Braves as the top two teams. No real surprise there. Cardinals, Marlins, Brewers, and Cubs. Cubs, I guess I was just a year early on because I remember at the start of 2023, I was really excited about this team. And then they won the NL Central this year. Pitching is definitely the calling card here. This Josh Simpson guy has turned into a real stud. So yeah, so that's kind of fun to see the Cubs recover to be something, and there being three teams from the NL Central in the playoffs. Yeah, that's going to be it for this episode. Next one will be seeing what actually ends up happening in the playoffs. It's really fun to be able to throw this rotation in the playoffs. I mean, this is a team that I think should be able to do quite a bit of damage. The pitching is really, really good. And I mean, just having a game where I can go Jacob deGrom into Joan Duran into Ryan Presley, like, you're not going to score more than 2 runs off of that. So if my offense can do anything in the playoffs, I think we should be pretty good shape. I think that we are the favorite to win the World Series. Doesn't always mean much, but we'll see where it goes. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.